Okay, my YouTube people, today I'm going to replace my chopper neck bearings. What happens is about 10 to 15,000 on this bike, those neck bearings wear right in the center because you're always driving straight. The bearings groove the race. I'll show you that when I get everything out. But the first thing I need to do is take the front end apart. That consists of taking the full brake system off, and that'll come off independently. Then take the handlebars off, undo the headlight, and move the headlight out of the way. So check out how this is done. The Springer front ends on the Harleys are really heavy, so I'm going to have a second set of hands helping me. So stick around, check it out, and if you have a Springer, drop questions in the bottom. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. The first thing I have to do is take this cotter pin out. If you don't bend it up real bad, a lot of times you can do it with your hands. All right, got that out. Now I'm going to take out these two pins. Looks like it needs to be lubricated, so it's probably good I'm doing this. Have to cut the wire ties for the brake line. Before I pull the caliper, I need to remove the master cylinder. To get that off, it's these 4 Allen screws. Alright, I have the master cylinder off. You want to be careful when you're moving it around like this, not to operate the brake handle, because you could suck air and put a bunch of air in the brake system, then have to bleed it. Now that I have the master cylinder brake line off, I'm going to take the caliper off. Of course, while you have this off, you want to check your brake pads. These are in good condition, so I'm not going to replace them. You can see this one's in good condition, plenty of pad left. Same with the other one. I always like to put the bolts back in where they came out of so I don't lose them. And the pin. There's an O-ring inside here used to hold the grease in, and I'll clean that and grease it before I put it all back together. For this link on the bracket, I have it double nutted. Behind the last nut takes this fender washer. I probably don't have to take the link all the way off, I'll just leave it there. You want to make sure this bracket moves freely on the axle and the spacer, because as the rockers go up and down, this arm stays stationary. It's pretty free, but I'll put some lube on it while I have it apart. You also want to make sure the Heim joints in the link are free and put some lube on those. Check your brake rotor's not warped too bad. That's not too bad. I did not feel any pulsing in my brakes, so I'm going to leave that go. The other thing you want to do is check your rim while you're here. And this rim isn't quite straight. I wasn't having an issue. I'll address this when I have to replace the front tire. Want to make sure that your wheel bearings aren't making any funny noises. After I remove the rim, I'll check the bearings individually to make sure neither one is grinding. But I don't hear a thing, and I wasn't having that issue. The other thing you could do is just give it a check. Make sure it doesn't have any unnecessary play, and this doesn't. I'm going to remove the front axle, and I hope that I don't have to remove my O'Doul's cap I have on there. If not, I may go to a Heineken Zero cap at this point. Front axle nut on this Springer is a 15/16. This is a Springer front end off of a 90s Softail. You can see that I customized it. You can use any of the Harley manuals for the Springers on how to assemble this and disassemble it, along with the lubrication that they want you to do. And there's also a bunch of checks that you're supposed to do. Normally when this is apart, you should lubricate the rockers. I'm not going to do that this time. I'll probably get those after the fact. That's a whole procedure in itself. To save myself from having to take the O'Doul's cap off, I'm just going to lightly grab this with a pair of channel locks. Now, I don't recommend this on bikes normally. It's not something I would do, but this nut's already loose, so that didn't put any tool marks in that nut, which is good. Right here, I'll give it a little tap. Take the washer off. You can see there's a spacer here. Over here, there's a brass washer, then the bracket, another brass washer, and then there's a wave washer. That wave washer allows this bracket to move as needed for the caliper to sit over top the floating rotor. I managed to get this off, and I just want to show everybody what this looked like. You have a brass washer, and that has a smaller hole in it. Then you have this spacer that goes into the bracket. There's a second brass washer. And as you can see, the second brass washer has a much bigger hole to fit over the spacer. And then the spacer has this waved spring washer. This all needed to be lubricated. It's kind of dry. And that tough time getting the axle out is because this brass washer is kind of mouth over a little bit. The metal's kind of mouthed over a little bit. I'll take a little emery cloth in there and clean that up so that it slides over the axle easier. That's how it goes together, and you can see that it allows that spacer to move in and out a little bit, which essentially allows the bracket to move back and forth. Again, I put everything together so that I don't lose any parts. Can't stress that enough. I know I say it in every video. Now I got to take the handlebar clamps off. Now that I have the handlebars off, I have to take both the risers off. It's a good idea to check the bushings while you have these out and replace them if it needs it. I just put the handlebars back here so I didn't have to disconnect the throttle cable. You can see that's where the throttle cable comes out of the bars. They have an internal twist grip on them. A lot of times these bolt holes will strip, and I can see mine did. All four of these are helicoiled at this point. These nuts are 3/4. Now to have the nuts loose, these just pull off. They have a lock nut, and they have this special washer. The washer has 2 grooves cut in it, and those grooves set right in here so that this stuff can't rotate. There's the bushing here on this. I'm not going to pull these out. I replaced it with urethane bushings a while ago, so they look to be still in real good shape. I'm not going to fool with those. This one, the bushing came out. You can see it's in good shape. On the factory springers, they use this funky bolt. This holds the triple tree to the springer and then has this part for the bushings. Then you put a nut on here to hold the bar mounts on. I'll just take those off. There's a 1-inch nut on here. Now I have to take the nut off. That's 3/4. Then there's a washer. And under here, there's an adjuster. You'll see this adjuster when I take the upper triple tree off. That sets your preload on your bearings after you have it together. Before I can get the upper tree off, I have to take the pinch bolt off. If this bike had factory tanks on it, I would take the tank off to do all this work. Since I have a Frisco Sportster tank on here, I'm just leaving it all together because the paint to me is not that important, and if I were to put a nick in it, it wouldn't bother me. You can see it's loose already. When you remove this nut, that'll allow the front end to drop out, and these front ends are pretty heavy. Definitely a 2-person job. But before I do that, I need to take the headlight off because of the wire. To get the headlight off, it's just these 2 Allen screws. Then I'm just going to set it back out of the way. This is how I'm holding the headlight out of the way. Don't judge me. Now I'm going to take this nut off, and that'll allow the front forks to drop out. This nut is 1 3/8, and when I went to take it off with the 1 3/8, it moved so easy that I realized it's not much more than hand tight. That's encouraging. There's still good grease in there, and I'll show you how I make that happen. Now I got to get the seal off. Here's the seal off. It should drop down out of there at this point. Oh, there it is. I want to make sure the front end's not getting light. Just pop right out. Yeah. So one of my tech tips on these Springer forks is to make sure that you have a grease fitting on your neck. Now this bike did not come with this grease fitting, but Springers wear out the bearings so fast, I drilled it, tapped it, and put a grease fitting in it. And that's why you see my neck is so full of grease and fresh grease. They'll last a lot longer if you're pumping a lot of grease into them, but I get the feeling because this is a hardtail, it wears the neck bearing even faster because there's more force put on it. What you find a lot of times is that the upper bearing's in really good shape along with the upper race. When I get it out, I'll clean it up real good and I'll show you what that looks like. The lower bearing's the one that wears real heavy. Where you really see it is in the lower race. You'll be able to see that clearly once I get it out. So to get the race out of the cup, it's easier for me to take it out of the frame. If you look right there, there's a dowel pin, and that dowel pin goes into this cup to stop it from spinning because I have these internal fork stops on this bike. So I'm sure you can see in the camera there's a bunch of wear marks from the bearings. They pretty much just sit in place. When you turn the front handlebars, it doesn't move that bearing much. So where the marks are real light right there is the rear of the bike or the rear of that race. And then as you come around, you can see the heavy marks. That's the front of the race. It would go on just like this. And you can imagine that because the front end's torquing it this way, so all the load is on the front side of this. And that's why it has the heavy marks on the front side. All motorcycles do this if they have tapered cone bearings. So it's good to recognize if you're having the issue where it kind of stops in the center as you're turning. It feels like it kind of locks in. Then you know you need these bearings and races replaced. Next thing you have to do is get the lower bearing off the neck. And the way I do this is by cutting the outer cage. And then I have a special tool that I made, and I'll show you that. Once you get one or two of these bearings out, like this, then you can cut the lower part of the cage. Once you cut the upper and the lower, pretty much just spreads apart, and everything comes out together, rollers and all. Now you want to clean the grease off really good. After I wipe the grease off, I'll clean it with a little brake clean, make sure it's extra clean for the next step. This is the tool I made to get the lower neck bearings off. This is just a carbon steel pipe plug and tapped it for 7/16 fine thread, and I welded it to a standard piece of Schedule 80 1.25" pipe, and then I also welded an 1.25" nipple on it to extend it to the length I want it. Now I'm going to slide this over that neck stem. I'm going to put some weld around here to the lower race. Then I'm going to put the bolt in and turn it and press it off. I'm going to slip this over like that. I'll put some weld on it, and then I'll put the bolt in it like this. As soon as it touches, you'll see. So I only need to pull it the length of the race, which isn't that far. All right, I'll show you what that looks like after I get it welded on. All right, now I got it tacked on there. All right, that should be enough. Come on, get it well taut. Now I'll just take a die grinder and cut that weld. Now I'm going to put a couple of beads of weld on the bearing cup, and it should pop right out. These are really difficult to get out when you're not doing it this way. Now you want to turn it 180 degrees and do the same thing. Since this is my first time doing this, I'm going to do a third spot. Oh yeah, it's just falling out. And just like that, it fell right out. Thankfully, it didn't damage any of the chrome. I could put the new one in right now, but it's got a lot of burnt grease, so I'm not going to do that. This should all clean up. Most of that's just black from the grease that was underneath the race. This is the upper neck cup, and you can see the front side of it almost had none, and all the wear was on the back side. Now I'm going to get this race out. Again, I'll just take, I'm not even grabbing it tight. And there it is. That's the only way to do these. Now that I have the races all out and everything's clean, I'm going to start going back together. First thing I'm going to do is put the bearing onto the stem, and I'm going to heat this up before I put it on, and then I'm going to use these two tools to bang it on with. Now I am going to use MAP gas to do it. You want to get it hot, but you don't want to get it so hot that you ruin it. You only really want it at a couple 100 degrees. Won't take much with this MAP gas to get it there. That should do it. Want to make sure that the cone is facing up.
Yeah, right.
Want to not use your hand that doesn't have a glove on it. And this should tap right on. Alright. Now you can hear it's all the way down. I just use a couple different spacers I've acquired over the years. This is just a piece of pipe. The next step is to get the races back in the neck cups. and I have the races in the freezer. Next thing I'm going to do is put a little heat on the cups. These, you can get them a little hotter as long as you just don't want to discolor the chrome. Now I'm going to go get the races out of the freezer. You want to give them a quick coat of something. I'm going to use WD-40 before you drive them in. Here's the race. You can see it's got some frost on it. And give it that quick coat of WD. Put the race in with the taper facing out. Now I'm going to use the old race to put it in the rest of the way. Now I just want to check to make sure it's down all the way. And it's close. Still needs to go a little further down. Sound like that side's down. Sounds like that is. That one. Looks to be down all the way now. Alright, that does it. It's down even all the way. It's still plenty hot. Now I'm going to do the other one. I'll just do that off camera. So I want to point out that number 15 in this picture is the lower seal. And because I have those internal fork stops, that seal does not fit on there. So if you had the keen eye and realized that I left that seal off, that's the reason. Normally on any other Springer you put that on. On the top it goes the race, the bearing, the seal, and then the nut. I'm going to stall the front end and make sure that it goes back together like the picture. And then we'll move on because there is a special procedure for adjusting the tightness of the bearings on the Springer. Now it's a little tricky to get past the neck cup because they're a little fatter than normal. Just got to wiggle it back and forth a little. Getting there, right?
Yeah. We're almost there.
There it is together. I got the dust seal. Bearing went in first, then the dust seal, then the nut. Now I'm going to start the adjustment. There's a procedure for adjusting how to tighten the neck bearings. They use a plumb bob off the back of the front fender. There's a hole in the back of that fender, and you put a ruler on the ground and a plumb bob, and they adjust fall away. I don't have a fender, so I'm going to go more old school. I'm going to put the front wheel back on and then adjust it to where I feel comfortable. You want them loose to where they turn, but not sloppy loose to where they're just flopping all over the place. So at this point I'm going to install the front wheel. That'll require the spacer over here and then the brake caliper parts over here. I showed how to take those off in the order, so I'm going to put them back on off camera. Alright, now that I have the axle all in and the front wheel's all good to go, I'm going to hit the threads with some blue Loctite and torque it up to spec. This is a locking nut that goes on there, but I always put some blue Loctite anyway. I got the front end back on the bike, and this is how you replace the steering stem bearings on any of the Harleys. Just because this is a Springer doesn't change the process of how to get these bearings changed out. So please don't forget to like and subscribe. I thank you for watching and have a great day. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments and I'll answer. Thanks.